He wanted a refuge from his busy corporate and political life. A place where he could retire and enjoy all the activities he loved. Fishing, golfing, hunting. James had always enjoyed the simple things in life. Spending time outdoors in the fresh air, hearing songbirds chirping away, the wind blowing softly through the trees. And this is exactly what he found one afternoon while looking at a property for sale outside of Victoria, BC. The property was massive, over 500 acres of West Coast forest, sloping slowly down towards the ocean's edge. The forest had never been touched by modern man. It was crowded with old Douglas fir trees, which casted shade on the forest floor below. He had to wade through a sea of sword ferns, dirtying his expensive wool suit, but as he came closer to the middle of the property, he could see it. The sunlight filtered down through an opening in the trees and shone like a halo on the ground below. He stood there quietly, in awe at the beauty of the property, as the seller of the property looked on curiously. There was nothing there, but James could see what wasn't there. And he knew in his heart what this property would be to his family and what beauty this special spot would be one day. Home. His wife Laura would love it. She had dreamed about having a special place to raise her large family, and the glory of this place would not be missed on her. Finally, after working so hard for so many years, they were about to have the home of their dreams. But life rarely ends after the fairy tale is complete. Beneath the sparkle and the beauty usually lies something different. And be careful, because history has made one truth abundantly clear. Tragedy seems to spare no one. I'm Erin Morgan, and you are listening to Victoria's Shadow. James Dunsmuir was born in 1851 in Fort Vancouver, Washington. As son of Robert Dunsmuir, he was heir to his family's coal fortune. The Dunsmuir family had dominated the province's economy in the late 19th century and was a leading force in opposing organized labor. James attended school in Nanaimo, Ontario, and then Virginia. And it was in Virginia that he met the lovely Laura Searles. Although she was daughter of a North Carolina farmer, a lavish lifestyle wasn't entirely new to Laura, as her father was one of the largest and most prominent landowners in the region. When James and Laura first wed, they lived with his parents, Robert and Joan Dunsmuir, in Victoria. James managed his family's coal business from 1876 until 1910, and in 1905 he sold his Esquimalt and Nanaimo Railway to the Canadian Pacific Railway. In 1898, Dunsmuir entered provincial politics, winning a seat in the provincial legislature, and he became the 14th premier a few years later. In 1906, he became the province's 8th lieutenant governor, but officially retired from his political and corporate life soon after. The Royal Roads property was purchased by James in 1906. He and his wife Laura commissioned the renowned Canadian architect Samuel McClure to build a 50-room mansion in the Edwardian style. Local stone and Saturna Isle sandstone was used in the building's construction. Its impressive exterior is matched only by the lavishness of the interior. Oak and rosewood paneled rooms, large fireplaces, teak floors, and specially made lighting fixtures. James Dunsmuir was quoted as saying, "Money doesn't matter, just build what I want." And Samuel did build it. A beautiful castle which was constructed in only 18 months, and it was named Hatley Castle. Unlike James, his wife Laura loved the spotlight. She wanted the interior of the castle to be just as breathtaking as the exterior, and the castle was furnished in the most regal goods at the time. She wanted Hatley Castle to be a place where she could entertain her powerful friends and climb the social ladder. Large, lavish parties were held here with guests that included local celebrities and British nobility. Laura loved these parties so much that she often sang along with piano music to her delighted guests. In addition to the noble mansion, the Dunsmuirs also commissioned the creation of many beautiful formal gardens throughout the property. This includes the Rose Garden, Italian Garden, and the Japanese Garden, which features 2 small lakes. From the formal gardens, it opens to unfold recreational spaces, ocean frontage, farmlands, and forests. During its heyday, it was said that 80 to 120 gardeners were employed at any time to take care of the vast landscaping. After the death of Laura Dunsmuir in the 1930s, the estate was sold to the Government of Canada. At the outbreak of World War II, contingency plans were made for King George VI, his wife Queen Elizabeth, and their 2 daughters, Princess Margaret and Elizabeth. The Federal Crown and Council purchased Hatley Castle in 1940 for use as the King's royal residence. In the event of an invasion of Britain, they would relocate to Canada. However, in the end, the royal family and government decided against their leaving the UK during the war, and the family stayed in London. After that, the property was acquired by the Canadian Armed Forces, and it evolved into a military college which ran until the 1990s, and the estate was leased to the province of British Columbia. Royal Roads University was opened as a public, degree-granting university, which it remains to this day. A fun fact is that the university leases the campus from the Department of National Defense for $1 per year. Hatley Castle is also home to the X-Men's Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. Actually, there have been a lot of movies and TV shows filmed here. Smallville, the MacGyver TV series, Supernatural, and all of the Disney Descendant movies. But long before Deadpool came to visit, the Dunsmuirs moved in with their 12 children, of which there were 3 boys and 9 girls. Their youngest son, James Jr., or Jim, was only 21 years when World War I broke out. He wanted to fight, but his parents objected. He was too young and rich to be in the war. But Jim was fed up with waiting for his parents to consider him a man, and he was eager to fight for his country. So one night, he went to the mainland and hopped on a train to New York City. He then boarded the RMS Lusitania, bound for France. But just off the south coast of Ireland, the vessel was torpedoed by a German submarine. Thousands of men lost their lives, including Jim, though his body was never recovered. Back at Hatley Castle, James was heartbroken by the loss of his youngest son. He would spend nights pining away in his study, located on the ground floor of the castle, endlessly playing a record called "Where Is My Wandering Boy Tonight?" The song echoed through the castle at all hours of the day and night. The whole house was in mourning. Listening to their master grieve, the staff was constantly reminded of the loss for the family. And while James found the song somehow comforting, it was starting to get to his wife. Laura was equally upset about her son's death, but grew fed up with the music. Unlike her husband, she was convinced that her boy wasn't dead, and that he would one day return to the castle. The music echoing in her head, Laura stormed into his study one night and broke the record. James passed away at his fishing lodge shortly after. It is said he may have died of a broken heart from losing his favorite son. Laura never got over her son's death and had nightmares for the rest of her life. She never felt sure that her son was really dead. To her dying day, she kept looking towards the sea, as if one day he would rise from it and return to her. Jim would one day be seen again, but not in the way that anyone had expected. The Dunsmuirs' youngest daughter, Dola, would occasionally see Jim's ghost wandering around the castle grounds. He was wearing his military uniform and watching his sister intently, mouthing the words, "Everything is all right." Whenever she ran to him, he would disappear. Still to this day, people are shocked to see the apparition of a young man wearing a World War I military uniform, wandering the gardens or walking up from the lagoon. James also seems to have not left the castle. To this day, workers have seen an apparition of an old man or heard strange noises coming from the castle. Some say they've heard music playing, shuffling footsteps, and the sound of cupboards being opened and closed, as if someone was pacing back and forth looking for something. Perhaps even in death, he is still looking for his beloved son, since some have heard the song, "Where is my wandering boy tonight?" playing eerily throughout the castle. The haunting melody always seems to come from the commandment's office, what used to be James's study. Shortly after Laura's death, a housemaid reported having strong feelings of being watched when no one was around. Her feelings were so overwhelming that she refused to go in some of the rooms of the castle alone. Other staff would hear pots banging in a vacant kitchen and complain that doors and windows opened and closed on their own. Royal Roads Military College used the castle for a dormitory and mess hall for cadets and staff officers. It was during this time that Laura really made her presence known. When the military college first opened, Jim's room and surrounding areas were turned into dormitories for the young cadets, but many cadets were too afraid to venture there. While studying late at night, the cadets would sometimes feel like they were being wrapped in a mass of freezing cobwebs. Many reported seeing the ghost of a small old woman, presumably Laura, who often would appear at the foot of their beds. As soon as they would jump up and turn on the lights, the apparition would vanish. When cadets were sleeping, if they had the covers pulled up over their faces, the ghost would slowly pull back the sheets to take a peek. It was as if she was mistaking these cadets for her late son Jim and checking to see if it was him. One cadet, who was acting as a senior officer at the time, had an especially unraveling experience. Early one morning, he had awoken to feelings of someone tugging on his legs. As soon as he opened his eyes, he was horrified to see an apparition of an old woman holding him down. He tried to get away, but she held on tight. When he finally managed to break free, the woman disappeared. Perhaps he looked similar to her son, and she needed to take a closer look. But there is still one person that we haven't discussed yet, and truth be told, she's not a Dunsmuir at all. This is the story of a young woman called Annabelle. Annabel came to work at Hatley Castle as a young parlour maid and had quickly won the affections of Laura Dunsmuir. The two bonded in a way that wasn't expected for an employer and her servant, Laura treating Annabel more like a daughter than a maid. Perhaps Laura saw some of herself in the young girl, since she too had come from more humble beginnings. So when Annabel told Laura that she had become engaged to Mary, Laura was delighted for her. Due to their close bond, she offered to pay for the young girl's whole wedding, a generous act that truly was a blessing to Annabel. But when the day of the wedding arrived, the groom was nowhere to be found. He had left the young girl at the altar. It was soon after this that Annabel would learn that her fiancé was already married to someone else and even had children. Embarrassed and devastated, Annabel retreated back to Hatley Castle. Crying, she stumbled up to the third story, entered the bathroom, opened the window, and jumped. Over the years, people have seen the third floor window opening and closing on its own, and many believe this is the distraught spirit of Annabel. During its years as a naval training academy, the cadets would sometimes see a young woman walking the castle halls before disappearing through a door or window. But arguably, the most chilling account of all is that which a few people have witnessed. It is reported that they would see her apparition crying in a certain room. Suddenly, she would notice them, get up to walk to the window, and float out through the window towards the sea. This has been Victoria's Shadow. This episode was written and produced by Aaron Morgan. If you are interested in true crime and spooky history about Victoria, BC, please like and subscribe below. Until the next episode, stay spooky.